It's always shocking when one of our favorite celebrities passes away, but some of these deaths read like a mystery novel. And some of them have autopsies that provide answers that only lead to more questions. Here are some of the most mysterious famous autopsies. This first one remains the single largest mystery in Hollywood.
Elizabeth Short was born in Boston to a simple family. Her father left her and her mother at a young age, but after a 12-year separation, Elizabeth moved to California to be near him. There she worked as a waitress and allegedly held deep aspirations to be a star. There have been long-held rumors that she worked the streets, but this is just speculation and has never been proven. On January 15, 1947, her body was found nude and severed in 2 pieces in a vacant lot in the Leimert Park neighborhood of Los Angeles. This was a sight that could turn even the strongest stomachs queasy. She was last seen alive days earlier on the 9th. She was only 22. Her body was cleanly severed at her lower waist. She had been flayed in areas of her upper thighs and chest region, meaning skinned. She had deep lacerations from the side of each mouth that extended to each earlobe. This is known as a Glasgow smile, and it originated among street gangs in the 1920s. She had been near completely drained of blood, which is called exsanguination. Her intestines were removed from her body. They were neatly tucked beneath her lower half, which initially concealed them from witnesses. She had wounds on her head that penetrated her scalp with contusions to the brain. There were signs of a brain bleed caused by blunt force trauma. The discovery site was not the scene of the crime. The only traces of blood found were on a large sack near her body. The most devastating finding was that she was alive through the torture. Her cause of death is listed as cerebral hemorrhage and hypovolemic shock. In other words, it was the blood loss that killed her. Tragically, her case has never and likely will never be solved. This case is so strange. Is it a whodunit or tragic accident? A beautiful, vivacious starlet who couldn't swim and was terrified of dark water was found floating face down in the ocean in 1981. She had a rocky relationship with husband Robert Wagner, who happened to be the last person to see her alive. What happened to cause the star to die by her worst fear? Natalie was on a boat trip with her husband, friend Christopher Walken, and the captain at Catalina Island in California. They had enjoyed a dinner at Doug's Harbor Reef before heading back to the yacht. The manager was concerned about their safety due to their level of intoxication. Wagner and Walken have both changed their stories about what transpired on board, but at 11:05 p.m. it was discovered that Natalie, along with the inflatable dinghy, was missing, yet nobody alerted the Coast Guard until 3:30 a.m. Just short of 5 hours later, Natalie's body was found floating near a cove about 1 mile south of the yacht. The dinghy was beached nearby. Her examination revealed several abrasions on the left side of her face, as well as recent bruising to her left forearm above the wrist with swelling and deformity of the bone. This could indicate a sprain or a non-fractured wound. There are also recent superficial bruises present on both lower legs. Her airways, lungs, and stomach contain a large amount of white frothy fluid. Her time of death is estimated to be around midnight. Toxicology revealed a spiked blood alcohol level. The amount of froth found in her body points to her being alert when she drowned. People in a panic and fighting tend to have a large amount from frequent attempts at breathing. Her death was reopened in 2011 and cause was changed to drowning and other undetermined factors. Her husband was announced to be a person of interest and is no longer cooperating. The case appears to still be open today. I cannot think of a celebrity death with more disturbing twists and turns than Johnny Lewis. Best known for being one of Katy Perry's boyfriends and portraying a beloved character on Sons of Anarchy, Lewis seemed to turn into a different person overnight. This one's especially gruesome. Police responded to a disturbance at a California home in 2012 to find a man lying dead in the driveway. They had received calls about a woman screaming. The man was identified to be 28-year-old Johnny Lewis. He had a deep wound to his chest, multiple bruises and scrapes to his neck and arms. He was already in a state of rigor mortis and had skin slippage to his chest and torso. He also had a huge gaping wound to his head that revealed brain matter. Inside the home, the body of an 81-year-old woman was found. She had been brutally beaten to death. Her head was nearly caved in, leaving her unrecognizable, and the entire upstairs looked like it had been ripped apart. An investigation would later reveal that Johnny Lewis murdered her just before his own death. The examination of Lewis revealed that he had been partially strangulated, but it wasn't his cause of death. There were several deep nail marks on both sides of his neck. He had severe bleeding in the tissue of his neck muscles on the right side, and his thyroid cartilage was fractured, which is located just below the chin in front of the throat. The front left of his skull was broken in several places. He had widespread hemorrhaging or bleeding in multiple layers of his brain tissue and bleeding into his spinal fluid. He suffered complete fractures to multiple vertebrae in his spine. His right lung was collapsed, obviously caused by trauma. His aorta artery was intact but surrounded by an effusion of blood, as well as the middle section of his esophagus. His death was classified as an accident due to a fall. Evidence on the scene suggested that he had fallen from the top of the home. It is inconclusive whether or not he died on impact. The woman found murdered was the homeowner and Johnny Lewis's landlady. Some medical experts believe that a serious motorcycle accident that occurred prior to Johnny's death was a factor. Though no direct evidence was found, it's believed that it may have provoked his deteriorating mental status that was obvious in the months leading up to his death. There is still so much mystery surrounding Marilyn Monroe's death. We know the cause, but whether it was accidental, self-inflicted, or something more sinister is rarely agreed upon. She is famous for being a blonde bombshell who sang a sultry birthday song to JFK. She starred in films, she lines bedroom walls, she's inspired fashion throughout the decades, but dare I say that nobody really got to know the real Marilyn? Or should I say Norma Jean? What I see when I look back is the tragic side of fame and adoration. She is a reminder that being the most beautiful person in the world can come along with the opposites of happiness. The circumstances. In the early morning hours, when it was still pitch dark, of August 5, 1962, Marilyn was found nude in her bed, unresponsive by her housekeeper. She was lying next to empty bottles of strong medications. Her hand was gripping her bedside phone. The examination. There is zero evidence of external trauma. Both lung lobes are congested with slight fluid buildup. This is possibly caused by respiratory depression or slowed breathing caused by the medications. Both of her kidneys, liver, stomach, and colon are congested, which again can be caused by toxic levels of certain medications. Basically what this means is that, while alive, blood would have been unable to flow through these organs. Her cause of death is barbiturate poisoning. She had a lethal level of pentobarbital in her system, which is highly sedating, along with high amounts of another sedative. The classification is listed as likely to be self-inflicted. But here's the thing. There were no pill remnants found in her stomach contents. Considering the number of pills she supposedly took, there should have been. This is a red flag to me. I'm left wondering how these drugs got in her system because it's unlikely that she took them all orally as stated. Days before Christmas in 2009, Brittany Murphy collapsed in her bathroom, just minutes before she told her mom that she was scared and knew she was dying. The household had been sharing a flu-like bug in the weeks prior, so obviously nothing to worry too much about, right? Well, her friends were worried. They had been completely cut off from the starlet, and her recent reputation told the story of a girl who was lost, possibly in an abyss of prescription medications and alcohol. She was shrinking in size and her husband seemed to take over every aspect of her life. When people had a rare run-in with her, she had a void look as if the lights were on but nobody was home. Brittany was rushed to the hospital where paramedics and doctors worked tirelessly to bring her back but nothing worked. She was pronounced dead. Of course, most of you know that the story doesn't end there. Just half a year later, her husband died in the bed he first shared with Brittany and then Brittany's mother. His cause of death was nearly identical to hers, pneumonia and anemia. The examination. The body is well developed, normally muscular and slim but not excessively slim. There is petechia, located on the membrane covering her lungs. This is a discoloration due to bleeding and burst capillaries. Both lungs have a heavy, meaty consistency. This can be due to lung disease, but in this case it is due to fluid buildup known as pulmonary edema. This is a typical hallmark of pneumonia. The infection causes the lung tissue to swell, which can cause fluid and blood leakage from nearby vessels. The lower portion of the lungs appear especially dense. There are patches of redness in her colon. There are small areas of her kidney that are congested, which is indicative of shock kidneys. This is kidney damage, often caused by severe infection. Her platelets in her blood were too low, which helps it to clot. Her red blood cells were too small. This is a type of anemia often caused by low iron intake. She has both spiked levels of potassium and magnesium, which points to kidney failure, which would be a complication of the anemia. Her cause of death is listed as severe bronchopneumonia, respiratory distress syndrome, and anemia. Once her husband died of almost the same exact thing, all sorts of theories began flying. There was a possible mold outbreak in her home. Some people believe that her husband killed her and felt so guilty that he did the same thing to himself. At the end of the day, I am still stumped. I don't believe that this is an outright homicide. However, I do believe that her husband influenced her death somehow, whether it was not getting her help or keeping her confined. But I still can't solve this mystery, and it is maddening. On February 11, 2012, the day before the Grammys, Whitney Houston was found unresponsive, face down in a bathtub inside of the Beverly Hills Hotel. She'd been complaining of a sore throat while preparing to attend the award show. Immediately, speculation ran wild. Her painted past caused many to suspect drugs. But her death was anything but what the media expected. It was a perfect storm of several things. What makes this all especially haunting is that just a few short years later, her daughter was also found face down in a bathtub. She slipped into a coma and sadly died under the care of hospice 6 months later. The examination. There's a trail of dried blood coming from her nostrils. There's a perforation to her nasal septum, meaning a hole. There is a surface cut to her upper lip, and various abrasions all over her body. There are yellow-brown bruises on her forehead, eyebrows, chest, and nostrils that occurred near death. There is fluid present in both pleural cavities of her lungs, likely caused by aspirating bathwater while actively drowning. There's fluid in her pericardial sac, which contains her heart. She has a 60% blockage of her coronary artery due to buildup of plaque over time. There's a frothy substance found in her upper respiratory tract. Her stomach is distended and filled with water, as well as partially digested food. There's a scald burn to her back. According to toxicology, there is coke and a small amount of Benadryl, as well as other sedatives in her system. Her death is ruled as an accidental drowning, but cites heart disease and drug use as contributing factors. This is likely what happened. Whitney ran herself a bath because she wasn't feeling well. While getting ready to get in, she was struck with dizziness or lost consciousness, causing her to fall face first into the tub. She was unable to get herself out of the water, so she died from drowning. This tale is told by her external injuries. She may have been suffering a cardiac event or was possibly struck with a sudden arrhythmia or erratic heart rate, which could have been the cause of the fall. Heart issues can present as throat pain, especially in women, and her heart was very sick. It's unclear whether or not she felt herself drowning, but my hope is that she was too incapacitated at that point to be aware.
Bobbi Kristina Brown was a 22-year-old reality star, singer, and daughter of Whitney Houston. She was only beginning to realize her full dreams when she died in an eerily similar way to her mother. Much like Whitney's, Bobbi's death left many unanswered questions. Nick Gordon, her fiancé, who was also raised by Bobbi's parents from the age of 12, was found civilly liable for her death, yet investigators couldn't find enough evidence to support foul play. On January 31, 2015, Bobbi was found unresponsive, yet breathing, face down in a tub filled with water. Nick Gordon and his friend made the discovery. She was rushed to the hospital and induced in a coma, but she never woke up. She died 6 months later in hospice care. Her examination revealed sporadic bruising and healed scars on her arms, legs, head, neck, and torso. She was also missing several teeth. It was obvious that she had previously endured serious injury. She was involved in a motor vehicle accident prior to her death, but there was also an alleged history of abuse in her relationship. There were no signs of recent head trauma, but there was cerebral atrophy, meaning areas of the brain had shrunk or cells were lost. Her lower lung lobes were congested with pooling of blood. Her toxicology report detected a combination of morphine, a benzodiazepine which is sedating, and a substance that starts with a C that I cannot say. Her cause of death was lobar pneumonia caused by being immersed in water, as well as hypoxic brain injury, meaning her brain could not receive enough oxygen, but the manner remains undetermined. That means that the coroner still cannot decide whether this was an accident or homicide.